Welcome back, folks. In this short lecture, I'm going to give you an update on federal efforts to address environmental justice in decision-making by federal agencies. So, as we saw in Koniski's chapter, the EPA under the Obama administration developed this thing called Plan Environmental Justice 2014. This is an agency initiative to integrate equity issues into regulatory activities, basically telling the agencies that if they're going to make any decisions that have environmental justice implications, well, they need to consider those implications in their decision making. For example, environmental justice considerations were included in the Clean Power Plan, which was later rolled back by the Trump administration. However, a problem with Plan EJ 2014 is that it was non-binding. So it wasn't even the result of an executive order, and it was certainly not mandated by Congress either, right? Plan Environmental Justice 2014 was eventually replaced with a new plan called Environmental Justice 2020 Action Agenda. And this was released by Administrator Gina McCarthy, who was the last administrator of the EPA under the Obama administration. This is also a plan that is procedural, administrative, and lacking substantive targets or deliverables, as noticed in a book chapter by Kerry Ard and Matt Dowiat. This action agenda is still in place. It's important to bring this up, that if you go to the EPA's website, you'll see that Environmental Justice 2020 Action Agenda is still there. So here you go. If you go to the EPA's Environmental Justice website, you'll see that Environmental Justice 2020, the plan, the action agenda, is still there. And you can actually click on it and you're going to get all the information you need about this specific action agenda. It's all there online in the EPA's website. So one would be tempted to think that, this is a policy that the current federal administration, the Trump administration, has decided to continue. But is that the case or not? Well, I wouldn't be so sure, and I'll show you what I mean by that. If you actually go to the EPA's Environmental Justice website, not the Environmental Justice 2020 Action Plan, but rather the Environmental Justice website, you'll see that it's there, right? So again, one would be tempted to think that this is part of the federal strategy to finally address issues of environmental justice. However, if you peruse through this website, you can get, for instance, to the environmental justice timeline that is included down here. And if you get down here, you can actually see a number of historical highlights, and you can run this on your own. So basically, if you go to like 1968, you have this description of the Memphis sanitation strike, which is perhaps the first incident that is tied to issues of environmental justice. And you'll see that in the 1980s and 1990s, all of a sudden, these discussions on environmental justice become more and more common. And then you get to the 90s and you're going to start seeing things like the establishment of the Office of Environmental Equity. You're going to see the Environmental Justice Small Grant Program. This is all under the Clinton administration. The EPA administrator creates the National Environmental Justice Advisory Council. So there's a number of things that happen in the 1990s. And then you'll see that there's, still some activity in the early 2000s. This is with George W. Bush. And once you get to 2008, that's the presidency of Barack Obama. Let me see if I can move this that way. And you'll see that there are other things happening here as well. But finally, we get to 2016, and that's the last number of actions that took place. They were basically enacted in 2016. The final framework for Environmental Justice 2020 Action Agenda that was enacted in 2016 before the Obama administration concluded. And then from that point on, there's not much happening, right? So there hasn't been any efforts by the current EPA administration to actually update these efforts in any meaningful way. So that tells you a little bit about whether, environmental justice considerations are important for the current administration or not. Another way of gauging the level of interest on environmental justice topics is simply to look at the proposed budget that the Trump administration has put together. And I'll show you that in the next slide. So one of the simplest ways to understand whether a government actually supports certain types of activities or not is simply to look at the budget, right? So in the United States, the executive branch, the president's office, puts together a budget. That budget goes to Congress, and Congress decides whether it wants to fund those requests or not. The EPA has an Office of Environmental Justice that works to protect overburdened communities from environmental and health hazards. Now, the Trump administration has attempted to eliminate the entire office back in fiscal year 2018. And then it's also tried to slash the program and the office and the management budget in fiscal years 2019 and 2020. What I have here in the screen is the proposal for fiscal year 2021, which is a fiscal year that is just starting now in October of 2020. If you go to page 214, you'll see that there's a request for the Environmental Justice Office, and you'll see that there was a fiscal year back in 2019. So this is the year that goes from October 2018 through September 2019, and basically this is in thousands of dollars. So 5,033 here, it means $5 million. So that's what actually the Office of Environmental Justice got. And then you'll see that it went up in fiscal year 2020, and that was because Congress basically rejected the requests of the Trump administration to slash the programs of the Environmental Justice Office. So it went up. And now you have the request that the presidential budget is getting for fiscal year 2021. And you'll see that it's been slashed almost, over 70%, from $10 million to not even $3 million. So it's a reduction of $7.5 million that the Trump administration is requesting for the Environmental Justice Office. You can see the project description here and what's the rationale for actually asking for that reduction. Basically, when trying to justify why there's a reduction of a lot of money for the program, it says that this change reflects the fact that we are proposing to eliminate support for the Environmental Justice Hotline, which is a communication line that people can call to complain about environmental justice problems. And they're also requesting to eliminate engagements with vulnerable and overburdened communities, and also slash environmental justice trainings, which the EPA has been doing around the country for a number of years now. So again, if you look at the request for money, that's probably the best gauge that you can have to understand what the priorities of the administration are. All right, questions you should be able to answer. Well, just one question. What's the status of environmental justice efforts at the federal level as of October of 2020? That's it for this video. Thank you, and I'll see you in the next one.